category, DevTech and Azure with multiple accolades, and his passion is mostly monitoring and contribution towards the technical communities. He has been a cloud solution and DevOps architect, mostly focusing on delivering like scalable, efficient, and cutting edge solutions. So today we will be diving into AI assisted development, one of my favorite tool since I am from development background. I'm using this GitHub Copilot usually, especially for this agent mode. I mean, this is completely insane for the developers. Now I like I'm mostly from I know the technologies from Microsoft stuff now, but with this Copilot Studio, I don't have limitation of developing from for one programming language. Like recently, I developed one application using Go language, which is new for me. But with the agent, it was very helpful for me. Also, ChatGPT helped me a lot. So, coming days, the developers only need to have the skill set, architecture knowledge, and standard practices, so on. They need to know but the repeated things like writing code, writing particular functions, bit of pieces can be easily done by AI, especially GitHub Copilot. So I'm excited for this session, especially this MCP, which is getting really popular these days. So over to you, Marshall. Uh, Maybe you can share your
Hi there.
screen and start the session. Hi,
Hi there.
nice to see you.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. And thanks, Frank, for the previous chat. It was pretty interesting, pretty cool stuff. Um, I will just turn my camera off just for my internet connection. But thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming today. Thanks for joining and the introduction as well. Um, I'm Marcel Lupo, DevTech MVP. Very much in the development space with VS Code, GitHub Copilot, and we're going to show you some pretty interesting and cool stuff today. So just let me know when you can, if you can see my screen, if you can hear me okay. Um, Let me just quickly jump to
We
my.
can hear you well, and we can see your screen as well.
Okay, perfect. So this is just, I'm just going to quickly show you my GitHub. This is my GitHub page. It's PWD 9000-ML. And if you wanted to connect with me, or you can find all my details here in my blog, X account, my repositories, and a little bit more information about me. Yeah, if you want to get in touch. So, so I'm going to talk about MCPs today, especially the GitHub MCP server. And I don't know if any of you, how many of you are developers or use VS Code, but MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. And this is where a lot of things are heading in terms of creating um, uh, or making platforms agentic to be able to plug into systems and actually understand the system that the LLM is talking to, or the agent, or having agents, and access to certain tools and things like that. So I'm also going to talk about, I'm sure you've heard of something called vibe coding, where you completely start from scratch with when you start coding and using different tools and different, code generation. But I'm going to show you today something quite cool that's more about context. Because without context, you can get a little bit lost. And I'll go a little bit more into that, what I mean by context in AI context engineering, which is kind of an interesting thing that's happening now as well in this space, and as well as agent space. Um, so I will look today at a repository that I've got called. What we're going to do is we're going to work with a repository called just type in here Terraform. Oops, sorry, I've got my wrong keyboard. Just one moment. Um, Hey, infrastructure as code repository today. Basically, a Terraform deployment repository. So, for example, I have, and this can be with any application. Basically, it could be application that you're writing. It could be, um, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be infrastructure as code, but the concepts are the same. So you've also got, you've got a README document to explain how to use this repository. You maybe have a changelog file. For infrastructure as code, I've got written here like a foundation resources, and what my foundation resources will build in Azure. It's like a resource group, managed identity, maybe log analytics workspace, basic things for me to get started with. Maybe it's a landing zone, and then I've got a storage account module for different environments. I've got etc. etc. Maybe an application a, ACR for storing container images. So I'm basically building up infrastructure here with this repository, and maybe this infrastructure is for a certain architecture or a platform that needs to run something. But say, for example, I need now something extra, like maybe I need a key vault, or you'll see that I've got all my files and folders on a certain structure. So I've got my variables, my main, my foundation, my different variables for the structure, and then I've got the same structure for storage accounts. Maybe I've got the same structure for etc. etc. Now, I'm just going to open VSCode here for a moment and go, if I want to add the MCP server for GitHub, what can I do with that MCP server? So if I use GitHub Copilot chat, I can ask it things about my code, and how I can improve my code, and so on and so forth. So, for example, in my foundation Terraform file, I can ask it to generate me code for creating something, but I still have to commit that code. I still have to create a pull request for that code. Maybe there's a ticket in my GitHub repository. So if I just jump to the GitHub repository here, you'll see at the moment I've got no issues. I've got no open tickets here. I have no pull requests. I can see the code. But what if I want to interact with this repository directly from the IDE from here? And this is where the MCP server for GitHub becomes very, very handy. And I'm going to show you where you can configure this. There's basically two ways that you can configure this. In your settings.json file, under the option, or actually, if you go to settings, and you just type in your settings file here, MCP chat, and we can go here. Where do we want to create our MCP servers? You see as MCP server sampling and MCP is enabled, so editing it into JSON. I can basically create my MCP servers, if I can find them. I get this, where did I? Oh no, sorry, it's mcp.json. I'm just quickly going, that's the incorrect file here. So you can basically add your MCPs in a couple of different ways. And MCP servers you can add through either running them locally on your computer, so you download them as npx packages, and you run them. I'll show that as well. You can use Node or Python, and it's a normal standard input-output to the server. So it's just a process that's running on the computer, or a server package, or a Docker file. Or you can use MCPs that now are remote through HTTP, and I'm going to show you how to set up both of them. So basically, if you open up GitHub Copilot chat over here, You'll see at the bottom here, you've got different options like ask, edit, and agent. If you put your thing on agent mode, you'll see a little tool configuration box here. See new tools available. I can restart my, I can discover for tools. So, for example, if I've got, you see it says here, the MCP server definition, remote GitHub MCP wants to authenticate to GitHub. And this is because I've already got remote GitHub MCP server configured on my machine. And I just need to authenticate. So I'm just going to allow that for a moment. It's going to ask me to authenticate. I'll show you where to set this up. And I am going to just open that. And now I'm authenticated. Now to set this up, if you click on the tools button here that says configure tools, you'll see at the bottom, at the top here. You'll see at the top here, you have something called built-in, and you see here I've got an MCP server called GitHub MCP with Node. I can turn that off, and these are all the things that I can do. I can create branches. I can, these are all API calls that I can make directly to my GitHub account. This is the MCP server for Microsoft Docs, MCP server for Azure. What can you do? You can ask questions about Azure. Now, this is the remote MCP server for GitHub. I'm just going to turn all of them off here real quick. Been playing around with them, quite a few of them. Now, if you want to add an additional server, you need to open your mcp.json file. And the mcp.json file is under your roaming profile, under code user. MCP.json is in a similar place to where your settings.json is on the same place where your VSCode is installed. But the MCP JSON file starts with basically a server's JSON and inputs. Inputs are things if you need to parse through, like a security key or maybe a token or something like that, and you don't want to do that in code. But you can see here that I have added a couple of servers, and we're going to look today at the ones that are called GitHub MCP with Node or remote GitHub MCP. And you can see that these are, stopped. Some of them are running. If you run the GitHub MCP server locally, it uses a normal standard input-output connection. You need your access token as well to connect to your GitHub. This one is currently the token that's not active anymore. But you'll need your GitHub token, and this is where you can use inputs and secrets as well. You will then connect to, if you go to GitHub's, if we go to this repository, for example, we take a look here. We'll go to GitHub. This is where you would come and, for example, download the MCP server, and there are quite a lot. There are so many. There's ones for AWS, there's GitHub. This is the GitHub one here. And you would download basically either a Docker file. Sorry, it's not that one. Let me just quickly go in here. Let's see. Maybe it is that one. Okay, official MCP server for GitHub. And you can see here that you can either add it via remote connection, or you can download the various different formats or files that it comes in, which would be, if I can find that here quickly, it gives you as well what arguments you can run or you should run. But I just want to see where is the local versions. Yeah, so the local versions, you can either run a Docker image, you could run a Node agent if you've got Node installed. I'm using Node on my machine, so let me just quickly jump back to um, uh, here. That the only problem is if you download your MCP server and run it locally, you'll see here there's only 26 tools. So it means, it's quite limited because it's an old version. So if I wanted a newer version, I need to go and download the latest NPX package to keep my tools updated. So, and then I can start this MCP server. I'm not going to use this one. Basically, I'm going to stop that one because it doesn't have all the tools I want to use. But if we look at the remote MCP server, you'll see here it uses the URL that connects, and it's using HTTP. And I don't need to pass through my PAT token or anything. I authenticated when I was refreshing my tools here at the bottom. It just authenticated me into my GitHub repository, and you can configure what sort of access it can have over your repository when you enable that process. Now, I'm going to start this remote MCP server, and then I'm just going to quickly open up the toolbox again. And now you will see that my MCP server with Node turned on for some reason. Now you'll see here I've got my MCP server for GitHub running. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say okay to that. I'm going to turn off some of these extensions. Just bear with me one moment. You can also kind of look at these tools and say which ones do you want to use, because you might not want to use all of them. You might go, I don't want anything to do with tags or workflows. Maybe I don't want to use dependable alerts or getting discussions. So you could do like you can turn some of these off, on and off. Let me just quickly see that I'm going to take all of these ones off to delete, download, fork, or maybe I want to use that. So you might spend a little bit of time on this. But what I can do now with that enabled and running, if I go back to my project, I can go into for example, let's go into one of my files here, foundation resources. And then I can type something in here. I can select my model, of course, which one I want to use. I'm going to go with Claude Sonnet 4, and I'm just going to say, can you check for me if there are any other projects on GitHub that are, I don't know, module than well, and then I can give it my context as well. I can say, you know, I want to know my foundation resources. I give it that context, or it will use the current file. And if I run that, what it will now actually go and do is it will look at my code and kind of understand my code. Sorry, I can only use 128 tools at a time. So let me just quickly reduce that amount a little bit more. I'm going to turn this one off. Some of them seem to have turned on. Okay, let's try that again. 'Cause, 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 And so what it should now do is go look for similar module files on GitHub because it's got access to GitHub, and it will look at all the public um, repositories out there. So you can see here what command it runs. It runs that remote GitHub MCP server, and it will go, it will give me an output here, and where it's find it, it'll go and search basically all the repositories online in github.com. And then it goes and get some more specific examples by examining the most relevant repositories that it's found. Show you let's see what the output comes from there. Okay, so it says it's found some similar repositories out there on the internet. Gives me the repository online. I can see that's from Microsoft. Actually, it's one of theirs. It's given me a few here actually. So yeah, most similar projects. So Phantom Company, TF Azure Core. Wow. Okay. So I can then actually go. Let's go and have a look at this one. Out of that, but let's go and check it out. Just to make sure. Open that a new tab. Okay. Oh yeah, and I can see there's a resource group here. Cool. So I know that exists. So what I can do now next is I can say, I'm not going to take that one. Let's take the one from Microsoft, for example. So it says here that the Microsoft TRE, which is Trusted Research Environment, is an accelerator for building trusted research environments in Azure, contains some resource groups, key vault, and user-identified resources. And what's the use case? Okay, I want to try this repository. So what I can do then is I can say, on the repositories that you have found, use the, sorry, not that one, to use this one. I'm just going to copy that. Use that repository and compare the code. Know if any features can enhance my code that is used on the remote repository. Or any features that I might, it will now it should now basically go and compare my code base or specifically this file with the code base from the remote repository that I've given it. So I'm not actually coming out of my IDE or anything like this. Is all happening inside of the IDE, and it's checking GitHub and it's interacting with GitHub, and that's what the GitHub MCP server is all about. And we'll see what it comes back with in just a moment. So it's basically going and getting the contents of the files. It takes a little bit of time to run. Downloaded a file there, downloaded the main file, downloaded the AKS port identity, managed identity, main. Basically just parsing through the files on the remote repository. Okay, so then based on the analysis, your current code strengths are that, but you're missing security enhancements. It may be a critical security enhancement with private networking, telling me to add private networking to my key vault, add service connections. So it's giving me, our back is role assignments are missing, advanced naming conventions I can use, resource extensions, validation, enhanced outputs. So what I can do now, because I don't want to do it right now, is I can say, uh, thanks for recommendations to create these as my repository that we can look at them and tackle them one by one, and also so that they are logged. So what it's going to do now actually is it's going to go and create. So if you use Azure DevOps, this would be similar to creating work items or user stories or tasks. What it should be doing now in my GitHub repository is it should go and so it's going to say, do you want to create a new issue in, oops, you want to create a new issue? Yes. I'll ask you if you wanted to create new issues for these items that we found that we want to enhance our code with. I want to create another one for that. And if we go back to my GitHub repository now and refresh the page, let's see if there's another one. It's only created 2 so far. I think it was about what, five different ones. No, seven different ones. I won't let it create all of them. So I'm just going to stop it here, just for the time's sake. So if we refresh our page here now, we can see here that there are 2 new issues. And you can see here that it's got high priority enhanced key vault security settings for production enhancement, high priority and security event tags, which is pretty cool. So I go in here, I can see there's an open ticket. The current state is code protection should be true for production. Soft delete keys should be, for production should be 7 days. Proposed enhancement, what I could do to remediate that problem. Required variables, if I need some new variables to be created. Which files do I need to update, what the priority is. And now I can start working on this issue. Or I can maybe, if I have a team, I can maybe assign this to a team member. I can maybe have a look at one of the other tickets instead, or things like that, right? So I can see here that private endpoint should be added for key vaults, for example. What's the current state? It gives you a proposed enhancement, things like that. I can then I could do pretty much anything with these MCP servers. They're very, very powerful tools. And like I said, you can kind of enable ones that you want, enable ones that you don't want. You can do, there are so many. You can create branches. You can create, like I just showed you how to create issues, for example. You can do, you can get pull requests. You can look at commits, all sorts of cool stuff like that. And I've actually not done any work yet on my code. I've just let the LLM kind of analyze my code and compare it with some code on GitHub. Similar code, maybe to see where I can enhance my code, or maybe I've got something missing. Maybe I've got some security issue somewhere. Um, um, Pretty cool stuff. So that covers MCPs. I wanted to cover context engineering also because I think it's important. So in GitHub, when you have this new concept called instructions. So for example, under the GitHub folder, you can create a file called copilot-instructions. And you can enable this by going to your settings and if we just put you can use you can enable this to say use instruction files, and it'll tell you where you can put that and where you can go to learn more about it. But an instructions file is basically, so this project of mine means I am creating infrastructure as code, and I'm doing it in a modular way. But these are instructions that I want to give to the Copilot about this repository. So maybe I have guiding, maybe I have Terraform coding standards, code structures and organization. Always use a consistent directory structure, create dedicated modules that are reusable, keep resources definitions separate by files. For example, my networking components, I want in a network TFL, storage components, I want a storage TFL compute, rather than one big massive main TFL. So I can kind of give it instructions like how should it work? I want my naming convention to look like this. I want to use for each instead of count where I can. I want to, and it's just giving your LLM as much instructions and best practices of the code of your repository, so that when it starts recommending you things, that it will do it in that way. And that's kind of, and you can also, you can point it, like I say, to, apply my general guidelines coding, which is another MD file, which is in here, which has got my general coding practices. But then I can add more stuff on it, like always prioritize security-based practices, favor idempotent solutions, or use British English spelling, for example, maybe when updating documentation, or US English if you're in the US, or whatever sort of kind of alphabet you use. Use naming conventions, use Terraform formatting, like run a Terraform format before doing, a commit, or things like that, to make sure that the code is always formatted nicely. And that's basically how instructions work. So if I was to ask it, what is my naming convention for resources in this project, and I can just give it the context as my code base, which is, I think it's just hashtag code base. See what it comes back with. It should use the instruction files for this. Slower. I think instructions are very, very amazing feature that's coming. You can also see here where you want it to apply to. Like I just wanted to apply to the whole project, the instructions for my project. You can see here that my naming pattern or my naming conventions look like that. And then I can say, for example, then I can maybe put something like that. Please summarize this naming convention for me in the README file, in my README, because maybe it's not there, and it can do that, and so on and so forth. But I won't do that now. I want to jump to another topic called prompts. Now, say, for example, you are writing your code here in, I don't know, foundation resources. You will write it a prompt like, you check if there are any security issues in my file. and I can again give it that context of that file and run it. But I want to show you something better that you can do. So there is this concept called prompt files that's come out. If you, under your GitHub folder, create a folder called prompts, you can then create different, I want to almost call it personas or context. Maybe you have, when you make changes to your code, you need to update the README file or the documentation or the wiki. So this is a prompt you will probably use a lot. You will always ask the same thing, potentially. So what you can do is you can now create these prompt files. So you can say, you give the prompt file a name called update README, and you can actually tell it what mode you want it to use, from your agent, ask, or edit mode. I want it to be edit mode. And you can also tell it which tools you want to use. So for example, remember when I told you about these tools that you can use, like the MCP servers? I want to be able to use my code base and maybe fetch stuff from web page or URL. I want to use those two tools. And my description is just update documentation with any new changes. That's all I want. But then you can give it a persona. You can say you are a I don't know, for example, a technical documentation specialist, writing documentation in Markdown. You give it like a kind of like I want to say a persona, and it's complaining here about something. Okay, not a biggie, not a big problem. And then you can give it some requirements. Look at the last 10 commits in my repository because I want to make, when I make changes to my repository, I wanted to add it like a change log. So I was going to say, look at the last 10 commits in the repository and to identify the changes that has been made. And then use the existing README structure, and I'll give it a path to the README to keep that same structure. Ensure that a new section is consistent with the current style and formatting. Update the README file with new changes at the beginning of the file with the latest section header with a date and a header. Include a brief summary of the changes and use Markdown lint to make sure that it's properly formatted. So you kind of give it all these instructions. Now, how do I access this prompt? So for example, if in my prompt window here at the bottom, instead of typing all of that, I will just type / and I can invoke the prompt by using the name of the file. So it was update. Oops, so I'm just going to say update readme.md, and that's it. I'm just going to press enter. It's now going to read this file that I've created, like this persona, you could say, and it's going to go and look at the last 10 commits that I've done in my repository, or maybe you could do whatever the last pull request description was, or there's many ways that you can do this, or just updating. So it's just going to go and look what's changed. And we can see that if it starts updating the README file here, okay, so maybe it's not doing anything here because I've not actually made any changes. Let me just commit that. Maybe it's not set up correctly now. Okay. I'll run that now. My VSCodes. Okay, so let's try a different one. But this should basically update the README file here. Maybe let me try something a bit different. So for example, I wanted a key vault. So I've got my foundation with its file structure. I've got my storage accounts with its file structure. You see, I've got the files, I've got a README. Say, for example, I want to create a new resource, like a key vault, for example, or what was missing from my. I think it. Uh, I can give it another prompt, like generate Terraform module structure. If I take this file name, and what is this going to do if I run this prompt? So it's going to use my GitHub repo and my code base. It'll generate a new module structure in the for me. So the goal is to generate a Terraform module structure, Azure resources based on a template for my. Yeah, you can point it to other websites on GitHub as well. You know, you create these files, etc., etc. So if I run this prompt, which is generate Terraform module structure, .md. MD. It should. Oh, actually, hang on. I'm going to stop that because I didn't give it any. I'm just going to say generate module structure to create a new key vault course. It's going to basically use that prompt file, that persona, to help me try and create another folder to create a key vault. And you can see here, I deleted number 6, so it's just going to number 7 now, but it's going, you see, it's going now and creating my folder here for key vault. And if I open that, it takes a little bit of, takes a couple of seconds to run. And you can give it, if you've got a design pattern documentation, you can point it to that. Like, for example, if you've got patterns, and there you go. So it's gone and created my main file. It's actually gone and created the resources for me. It's even used the same headings like how I do in the other modules. It's using the same naming convention that I have in my instructions. It's kind of using all the instructions that I've given it from my instructions files, to use certain my general coding standards to basically tell it how to work. It's create my variables here for me. So it's got the resource group variables, keyboard variables. So it's still creating all the resources here. Let's give it just a moment. Takes a little bit of time to create all the files. But basically, it will follow the same structure that I've got mine. It should start creating configs for dev, prod, UAT. I've got mine. It should create a README file. Just let it run in a minute or so. I'm just aware of the time. I'll just jump to the next one quickly. So for example, this prompt file is asking about code quality and security. So for example, I'm going to use mode ask, and I'm going to say use all the tools that I want to use. Maybe I've got tfsec, check for Terraform code security issues by running tfsec, check for code base issues using tflint. If you've got any tooling installed on your machine or IDE to use those tools, suggest any issues in the code. It's almost like a security code review, you could say, a prompt for that. And you see there's my README file. It's gone and created. I'm just going to stop that there because it just takes a little bit of time to create, but you get the idea. So let's say I want to do a security code review on my foundation, or maybe I created a new module and I want to do a code security review. I can then go / code like a module, and then again I can give it that context and say files and folders, and I want just my foundation folder. Let's run that. And remember, I just used ask. I didn't use edit or agent mode, so it should just give me some recommendations here. So, it says I'll perform a comprehensive Terraform security and code review on your code base using tfsec and tflint to analyze the results. Do I want to continue? Yes. And for this, you can see I'm not actually using external tooling because I have tfsec installed on this machine and tflint and the extensions enabled on my VSCode. I can kind of almost call them through the it interprets the tooling. So it says actually the tfsec was not found. Maybe I don't have tfsec on this machine. I think I might have, because I'm working on a different machine actually, so I might not have it. Okay, so it's going to install tfsec. It's going to ask me if I want to install it. I'm going to say no to that because I will just install it really quickly through. I don't want to install tfsec there. Let me just quickly see. I can install it real quick here. Oh, it's already installed. Okay. Let me just see. I don't know if I've got it enabled. It's definitely there. And it doesn't pick it up further. Let's give it a little bit more. Let's see. What's it this time? You can actually see here in the terminal that it's trying to run these tools. Pretty impressive. It's found 2 potential problems. Is you already see from here that page protection is not enabled, which is the same as what the the MCP server tool as well. We compared it to other code. So I just run the shell command, and that was one issue, and the other issue. The other issue here. ACLs doesn't block access by default, so that's an issue. But then what I can do once it's run through this is I can say you create issues in GitHub to resolve this critical with recommendations. Just let this quickly run through. And then because I've got all the tools enabled that I want with regards to my GitHub repository, I should be able to then to now basically just log that right away into my GitHub repo. I'm just aware that, about the time, and I think this is basically we're approaching the end of the demo here. And I would like to just leave a little bit of time for any questions, if there are any, because this basically will conclude the demo once this is finished. Has anyone got any questions so far about this? You can see I've got quite a few issues coming up here. Medium risk, high risk, and it's getting all those details basically from that TF6 scan that I've done. Everything else looks okay. I'm going to say log those issues for me in my repository. And now it's going to use, again, the GitHub MCP server that I showed very earlier in this demo, how it's going to log those issues for me in my repo without me having to go and do that manually. We'll see that in a moment. Okay. So to create an issue here, we go to our repository. You see here now I've got a critical security issue. Keyboard post protection is disabled. And you can see it's labeled it for me. Have a look here. You can see critical security vulnerability. It's created all the things I wanted it to do. It's even given me like checkboxes of stuff that it was expecting to see, and stuff that's missing. Too short, critical risk. I have to fix those two things. Let's see what the other issue is that it found. If it's still creating it, I think it will ask me to create it. That was just the one. Okay, and I mean that concludes the demo. Basically, we went through MCPs, context engineering with instruction files, and also using prompt files to basically do stuff that might be repetitive and with a little bit more context behind it. Are there any questions about this? Everyone's on mute. Which one? Well, I guess if there's no further questions, I can stop sharing the screen. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. I guess if there's any questions, I can put my put
Um,
my
Hi, Marshall.
hi there.
Hi. Thank you so much for this. Actually, this session is really deep dive. The one
Yeah,
who is going to follow, they will learn a lot of hands-on. Thank you for this wonderful and deep dive session. I don't think any questions are there, and also like you'll will you be able to share the repository that you demonstrated?
yes,
Yeah,
in
so that will be great because I saw one of the attendees has requested for the repository. So that will be away. And apart from this, I all good so far. And um, I don't see any other questions so far. So once again, thank you so much for this wonderful session with hands-on. I mean, the one we will have a recording also later, so anyone can go and follow this hands-on again step by step. It will be really helpful for them. Thank you so much, and a lots of learning. Even in the middle, I was trying to follow, but I lost some of the content. I was having chat with some other attendees. So, but the session is really good. I'm still going to watch this recording again for my
no
learning.
worries, no problem.
Yeah, yeah.
I've put some links in the chat here as well to show where you can get the GitHub MCP server. I've also put a link in the chat here with the repository that I just demoed, and
Mm.
also a link to GitHub's documentation on how you can set up these instruction files and prompt files. So for anyone who wants to go and check those out, they are in the chat here, the links.
Thank you for sharing the content. I will also share this in a group so that